Why do you put barriers up where there are none for me? This is the answer I got to a puzzlement that I'd taken to God in prayer. See, Adam and I had been interacting with a lot of indigenous people in Pennsylvania. And inevitably, differences in perspectives and theology had come up. I knew that all of us were serving God just from different perspectives, and I knew that the fruits of the Spirit were in both groups, just from what I'd seen. I was just having difficulty reconciling the Christian way in which I was brought up and the native way that I was learning about. Since this was such a pressing issue in my mind, I took the prayer with me into the sweat lodge. In Psalm 139, the prayer talks about how the author's relationship with the Creator began even before the person was in their mother's womb. Creator sees them in their comings and goings and calls them God's own. In John 3, Jesus talks about how no one having the ability to even begin to understand how God works until they have been born anew in the Spirit. It just doesn't make any sense until that happens. With this new birth, fresh perspectives can happen, and the journey can now begin. So, taken together, what can we learn from these passages? We can gather from the Psalms reading that God knows us inside and out, and loves us all unconditionally. There might be stuff that he doesn't approve of, but that's why grace is so important. The mind-blowing thing is that there's no people, past, present, or future, that God doesn't love this way. In the passage in John, Jesus talks about becoming a new creation in God's family. That new creation and new perspective can only happen if people have encountered God. Again, you can tell if a group, regardless of creed, has done this by the fruits of the Spirit being present. As humans, there's a tendency to put up barriers, sometimes in God's name, as to who God does or doesn't love. And oddly enough, those lines in the sand often fall along the same lines of who we as people love or don't love. What we forget is that God is the embodiment of agape love, which is why he sent Jesus to show us a new way to live and love people. See, the whole point of Jesus' ministry was to break down societal barriers and turn the religious hierarchy on its head. Instead of further marginalizing women, tax collectors, fishermen, and young people, he turned those people into his chosen family. In many places in the Gospels, Jesus specifically brings in the sick and the broken and marginalized people and loves and heals them. He doesn't check on what they believe before healing them or loving them. And he does not qualify his help before doing so. His entire ministry was built on concentrating on people that fell through the cracks of society. Our job, as his followers, is to help heal broken people, break down societal barriers, and turn social hierarchies on their heads. Our job is to love people as a revolutionary act. And that love starts with seeing people with others outside our bubble as reflections of God's creation, because they are part of God's creation. And as such, worthy of God's love and our love. And that, my dear friends, is how you walk in the light.